Hi, I'm Wendy Lathrop for GeoLearn, and this is another in the series of sessions I am doing particularly on floodplain management. This one is S for Sea and Shore, or about coastal areas in the National Flood Insurance Program. We'll be talking about the regulatory aspects of it and some of the physical aspects of coastal areas that make them more or less vulnerable to the hazards of water. To begin with, we need to look at what the National Flood Insurance Program defines as being a flood. We always know that anytime you have water someplace that you don't want to have it, we will consider it to be a flood. If you turn on the water in your bathtub and let the water run out without paying attention to it, the water that ends up on the floor is a flood. But in the National Flood Insurance Program, we're looking at much more specific locations and kinds of flooding, water actions that can be damaging and harmful that the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, are intended to try to protect against. So in the NFIP, Title 44 of the Code of Federal Regulations sets out the regulations and also definitions of the terms that are used throughout the program. Flooding is identified as a general and temporary condition of having water, but in particular, the one that we're going to discuss today is overflow of inland and tidal waters. Now we need to remember that not all tidal waters are on the coastline. We have tidal rivers that are not considered to be coastal areas. And we also have coastal areas that are not necessarily going to be tidally affected. So first of all, we need to define where is coastal. What does that term even mean? What does it refer to? It, of course, does refer to all of the areas along the Pacific and Atlantic coasts, along the Gulf of Mexico, but also along the shorelines of the Great Lakes. The 5 Great Lakes: Michigan, Huron, Superior, Ontario, and I can't remember the last one, but that's okay. We can look them up on the map. So anyway, the reason that the Great Lakes are considered to be coastal is because they are large bodies of water that are subject to wind pushing the water and creating wave action. That wave action causes an additional stress on anything that's along the coastline, whether it be the shoreline itself, the soils there that will be now subject to more erosion, or whether it be to structures that will now have the force of water against them, that hydrodynamic pressure. So those are the coastal areas that we'll be discussing today. The coastal regime itself has various parts to it. We start out with out in the greatest part of the depth of the water, we have the submerged land where the water is free to come back and forth with no obstructions. As the submerged land starts to rise and form the uplands area, we start to have different names for it. So we have the offshore area, when we start to have the rise in the subsurface area. Now we get the inshore. And when it strikes the face of the general land coming up, we have where the high water level reaches the ground. That's where we start seeing where the foreshore is. And then the beach is going to begin where the low water mark and the soil intersect each other.